in Yemen is the Hadi presidency, the Hadi government, and she doesn't.
No one cares.
She can talk all she wants about
exactly the same
the
thing
position
inside,
of the rebels,
exactly
but
the same
in
thing
fact
that's happening in Syria. The international community kept saying that Bashar al-Assad has to leave, but the Syrian people said Bashar al-Assad is the legitimate president according to election. Same thing happens inside of Yemen. The so-called Hadi
we're talking about Yemen, not Syria, so let's stick to the target.
He leaves. I'm giving you an example. The international community said that Bashar al-Assad is not the legitimate president, yet he was actually elected by the people. And in Yemen, he resigned and he fled to Saudi Arabia. And you still talk about Hadi as if he's a legitimate president or as if he actually represents anyone inside of Yemen. You could go to Yemen and ask them, and I believe that you will be punched in the face when you just say Hadi once.
Okay, Michael Lane, go ahead.
All right. Well, one more thing, if I may. I look forward to her providing me with any evidence of any international entity that represents the legitimacy, that recognizes the legitimacy of the Houthi rebels. It doesn't exist.
Well, give me any entity in the world that recognized Hezbollah against the vile existence of the Zionists, and I'll give you the same evidence, because it doesn't exist. Do you know why? Because you were funding that war against us.
We were talking about Yemen, not Palestine and Israel.
Exactly. We are all one axis of resistance, and you are fighting us because we say no to Israel, because we say no to Saudi Arabia, because we say no to the colonial settlers and the colonial regimes that your government has installed in our region. We say no and we fight, therefore we are the resistance, and you see us as terrorist organizations. Well, it's your problem. And any invader that's going to come into my country or into any other Arabian country will be faced by my anger, will be faced by my weapon, and I have every legitimate right to kill him. And that's in the UN Charter, sir.
Okay, Michael Lane, I have a question for you. You're saying that
I would only note for the record that Hezbollah is recognized as an international terrorist force, not a legitimate domestic force. So let's just leave it at that and move on.
And in Lebanon, we have voted in Hezbollah into the government, and we secure Hezbollah with our lives, and we give them full control of the political situation because we trust them, unlike the puppets that have been installed by your government in my country, which will be removed very soon.
Very well. Michael Lane, our guest there is in Beirut, Lebanon. So we can go on with that, but we just got to focus back on to Yemen. And I'm going to ask you, Michael Lane, you talk about the internationally recognized governments of President Hadi. My question to you is, what happens if within Yemen they don't recognize that, but the international community does, based on whatever rules that they have, which in their minds, that is what it is? Then what? Doesn't that lead down a road where there's still going to be instability?
Well, okay, there's many ways of deposing a government. President Hadi's predecessor was disposed of, and that's how President Hadi ascended to the presidency in Yemen. He can be voted out. He can be essentially run out of town by a military coup, which is what the Houthi rebels are trying to do. And he can voluntarily step down because he no longer has the support and confidence of his countrymen. But none of those have happened yet. You can say maybe that the Yemeni people are not confident in him, but he has not stepped down yet. So he is still the internationally recognized government.
The legitimacy by giving them weaponry, and we could ask them to pick up their weaponry and their armory and leave Yemen and just break that blockade and let the Yemenis decide for themselves what they want by first of all sitting together and talking without the war bombarding their own families, and second, whether they decide to a new constitution or to a new elections, that's up to them. That's not up to me, and it's certainly not up to you.
Well,
Michael Lane,
I think that's the point of what the upcoming talks are. I think you have the United States leading the effort among Western countries, pressuring Saudi Arabia, pressuring UAE to sit down with the Yemeni people at the conference table and let them decide what the future of their own country is going to be.
Donald Trump does not leave any kind of circumstance or an event, does not leave any point wherever he wants to talk. He talks about how he likes Saudi Arabia because they are paying money, and you want to tell me that he's going to tell Saudi Arabia to stop bombarding it because he wants to pressure them, because Donald Trump actually has a feeling and now he's going to be crying about the babies in Yemen that he have helped to kill. But that's because you, my friend, are delusional.
Okay, Michael Lane, let me get your reaction about...
I think you're misreading the news.
Well, Michael Lane, let's
let me rephrase that. Look, let me rephrase that. If you think for 1 second that the Yemeni people that have been killed by bombs made in the U.S., that they will open their hand and put it in the hands of the United States of America, then you have no idea what it means to be a Yemeni. You have no idea what it means to have the pride to keep standing on both feet.
I don't think anybody's suggesting that or asking that. That's a red herring.
While being bombarded. You said the U.S. is going to lead a peace talk, U.S. and peace in one sentence. That's never happened before. It's never going to happen.
Well, I never said we were going to lead the peace talks. I said we were pressuring Saudi Arabia and the parties involved, including the Yemeni people, including the Houthi rebels, to go to the peace talks. Remember, the last time the peace talks were tried to put together, it was the Houthi rebels who pulled a no-show and sabotaged the talks.
Bombarded for the past 4 years with top-notch missiles and top-notch bombs, and you want to pressure them more after having 18 million of their own people under famine, 247,000 children killed because of the blockade, because of diseases and because of other issues, treatable diseases, if I may, and because you also helped kill 3,000 women and 2,000 children, and you still say that the U.S. want to pressure the Yemenis into peace talks? How about the U.S. pressures its own puppets, the Saudis and the UAE, to leave Yemen, to end the blockade, and leave Yemenis alone for their own future, for their own fate, but at least try to help them out of the famine first by breaking that blockade, and just leave, stay away. If you stay away from us, we will live happily ever after. But you can't do that because you're an imperial power, you're a colonial power.
Okay.
We will fight you as long as we have the last grain of blood inside of us. Keep that in your mind.
Michael Lane, the United States Defense Secretary James Mattis.
Wish you luck.
The United States Defense Secretary James Mattis, Michael Lane, asked for or dictated a 30-day deadline for the Yemen ceasefire. Don't you think it's kind of strange that he gave it 30 days? Why didn't he say there should be a ceasefire immediately?
They have, Secretary Mattis has much more information than I do. There are obviously some plans afoot. I think the ceasefire realistically is not going to hold unless peace talks begin. So the 30-day deadline for starting the ceasefire coincides with a 30-day deadline for starting the peace talks. That's the best I can tell you at this point. Other facts or situations may evolve, and we'll see a little bit more into a crystal ball as to what's going on there. But I think the ceasefire deadline is going to coincide with the beginning of the peace talk deadline, which in the bigger picture makes a lot of sense.
Which coincided with the Khashoggi case, Marwa Usman, which then after that announcement of the 30 days, guess what happened? Saudi Arabia increased its firepower. There were more deaths, more civilians were killed.
Everyone
not giving some sort of a deadline
increases firepower leading into a ceasefire.
Okay, you heard Michael Lane.
Oh my God, they are being bombarded. You want them to just sit and put their hands together and play, please God save us from the bombs? Please, you're patronizing the people. Stop that. If you want them to start a dialogue, stop bombing them to start a dialogue.
No, I feel very sorry for the people.
But let me
I
go
wish
back
them well.
And talk. Really? Really? Because Ansarullah are not Yemenis. Because Ansarullah don't have tribes all across Yemen who they defend. Because Ansarullah, what?
Michael Lane, I guess maybe you did say something. Really. Do you have something to say to Marwa Usman? Michael Lane.
I said, yes, I do wish the Yemeni people peace and prosperity. I hope that the Yemeni people are able to make their own self-determination as to what their government will be without outside interference of any other countries. I hope they pursue peace, prosperity, and that the Yemeni people get the freedom and the opportunities they deserve. How can that happen if your
government keeps selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, which they know that they have a bad record in human rights, they have a bad record in actually controlling their own territory, they have a bad record in keeping peace with their own selves. They kill one another as cousins inside of the monarchy, and they have a very bad record, if I may, with the press, with Khashoggi, for example. But if I go back to the 30 days deadline that was given by Mattis towards the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I think he was telling them, look guys, you have 30 days. Either you get Hodeidah or you don't. After 30 days, we cannot stop our allies in Europe from pressuring us to stop this campaign. Either you do it or you don't. That's exactly what's happening right now in Yemen. More bombardment, more firepower, because the Saudis, Mohammed bin Salman is going to just crack himself up in order to make some sort of an advancement in Yemen, and he will not be able to do that. Why? Because he is in a dire situation politically inside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and outside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, because of that charade that he did in Istanbul by killing that journalist in this particularly vile way. But at the same time, inside Saudi Arabia itself, Mohammed bin Salman is facing a severe political deadlock with the people who were supposedly by his side. Now it appears they are not so keen to stay there, and at the same time the UAE is facing a lot of pressure from the Europeans, also from other countries, namely, for example, like China and Russia as well, who have been multiple times trying to engage or get involved in the situation in Yemen to try and find some sort of a clearance for the situation or to stop the war to begin with. But these 30 days, you're just basically telling them you have 30 days, kill as much as you want and just try to gain some land. If you don't, we're going to stop. So you are putting the lives of the Yemenis at risk here, more lives of Yemenis at risk, and by bombarding the port of Hodeidah, you are basically telling the remaining 25 million Yemenis that you will not have food for the rest of the 30 days. You will not have medicine for the rest of the 30 days, and it's not on us because we are trying to pressure them to stop, but they won't. Please, if Donald Trump wants the war to stop, he will pick up that phone and tell Mohammed bin Salman to go back to his playground and stop killing people.
All right, that's a very, very nice long speech. Let me only note after that long speech that the port of Hodeidah is reported as quiet today. Why is it quiet? Because of the pressure that the West is putting on Saudi Arabia, because the fact that the British foreign minister visited Saudi Arabia yesterday, and the lull in the activity there has...
We just watched a report that said
it's set up right here at the beginning of the show. I'm sorry you weren't listening to it.
Till dawn. Excuse me?
Okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. I'm sorry. We're fresh out of time.
Yes, the setup right at the beginning of the show said that it was quiet.
Unfortunately, we're fresh out of time. Wish we could continue. Perhaps another episode will invite both of you back. Thank you very much, founder of the American Institute for Foreign Policy, Michael Lane. And thank you, journalist and political commentator Marwa Osman. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of The Debate. From Miko Itawe, entire team in the capital, Tehran, it's goodbye.
I do believe that money in politics provides the ones with the most money with the biggest megaphone.
And Citizens United versus FEC.
Supreme Court reversed a century of law.
Corporations have religious liberties.
Corporations are people, my friend.
Which is an outrage.
But there's undue corporate influence from a variety of sectors.
They go to Washington and spend hundreds of millions of dollars. That's where the control is.
If you worked at Goldman Sachs and now you work at the Treasury Department.
Tilts our democracy away from the people and toward the powerful.
It had been an explosion. Cut corners on safety.
Never did.
Explosion in the mine was preventable.
The coal industry has a death grip on the state of West Virginia. Our Supreme Court is bought off. Our politicians are coal brokers.
Well, money's always been important in U.S. elections, but never to the extent we're now seeing.
Super PAC is it's a political committee that spends independently of the candidate. So what does that mean? What that means is, you can give me $10 million, and I will regulate, and I will create what's called a super PAC, and I will use that money to run advertisements.
These are the top stories. Palestinians say the UN Security Council has failed to shoulder its responsibility to stop Israeli aggression in the Gaza Strip. The British Prime Minister comes under fierce domestic criticism after announcing her draft compromise Brexit deal with the European Union. And a new official report reveals a dramatic surge in hate crimes in the U.S. last year, featuring a record hike in over a decade. .30 in the morning in Tehran. You're watching us live. This is Press TV. A United Nations Security Council meeting on the latest escalation of violence between Palestine and Israel has ended with no significant results. Palestinian Ambassador Riyad Mansour said the council was paralyzed and had failed to shoulder its responsibility to take action to end the violence. He added that there was one country that was not allowing discussions at the council. Ahead of the meeting, Palestinian factions issued a joint statement announcing an Egyptian-brokered ceasefire with Israel. They said they are ready to abide by the truce as long as Tel Aviv does the same. Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon, however, rejected a call for both sides to exercise restraint. 7 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes over the past days. Political analyst Paul Larudi believes that Israel is not committed to any truce with Palestinians.
Well, you heard Israel speak for itself by saying it will not abide by any conventions or any requests to reinstate the ceasefire. Of course, was it ever a ceasefire? Over the last, since March, we've had more than 200 people killed, and yet it was considered a ceasefire because Israelis were not killed. Everybody's waiting for that to happen. Certainly, this is something that Israel has repeated many times. Their objective is ethnic cleansing. They want to liberate the land from the people who are living on it and replace it with their own peoples. If they don't have to respect a ceasefire, if they see it, the ceasefire as getting in the way of them continuing their genocide, they're not going to respect it. They've never respected anything that the United Nations has ever asked of them, at least not for long.
Syria has strongly condemned deadly airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition in Deir ez-Zor province. The Syrian Foreign Ministry sent 2 letters to the United Nations Secretary General and the UN Security Council President. In the letters, the ministry said the crime committed against the civilians in Ash-Shafa village shows the total collapse of the international moral principles. Syria called on the Security Council to take serious and prompt actions to stop the killing of civilians. Damascus also called for the formation of an independent international mechanism to investigate the crimes in the village of Shafa. The latest airstrikes by the coalition caused dozens of casualties in the village. Political commentator Eric Wahlberg says Washington does not allow anyone to criticize the actions of the U.S.-led coalition in Syria.
Well, it's typical of what goes on in Syria. It's the Western agenda is in first place. So if you're criticizing that, you already are on the defensive. So the message isn't getting out. And one of the really serious complaints that should be made is against the use of white phosphorus, which is both Israel and there are accusations by the Russians that the U.S. is using it too. And of course, the Saudis are using that in Yemen. So this is in, the conventional weapons convention of 1980. This is in violation of that. And it could be brought out at the Security Council, and this could help turn back some of this aggressive American behavior.
Well, it is like a script from a Hollywood movie, except that it's real life. Saudi Arabia asked a group of businessmen to use private companies to assassinate Iranian enemies of the kingdom. It also asked them for a fee to disrupt Iran's economy. This was revealed by the New York Times, and what's more revealing is that this was done since MBS, the young prince, came to power. Watch this report.
Top Saudi intelligence officials close to Saudi Crown Prince had a series of meetings last year with a group of businessmen to discuss the assassination of some Iranian enemies of the kingdom, the New York Times reported. Among their targets were Iran's Qasem Soleimani, chief of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, who has been at the forefront of Iran's advisory efforts in Syria and Iraq against terrorist groups. The meetings were held at a time when Mohammed bin Salman was asking his advisors to escalate military and intelligence operations outside the kingdom.
The West understands that Iran is a completely different creature in terms of being a player in the Middle East, this Middle East drama. You know, we have Iran that is a Shia country. We have Iran and her revolution of 1979. In order to maximize their chances of at least bringing Iran to heel, they have to use players such as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Of course, the kingdom has to be very careful about how she goes about doing this, which is why she hires this type of dirty business out to third players.
The recent revelations show the Saudis have mulled over assassinations since the rise of bin Salman to power more than a year before the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. That is while they have painted his death as a rogue killing ordered by Major General Ahmed al-Asiri, who has since been fired but was present in one of the plot meetings against Iran. Among the businessmen was George Nader, a Lebanese-American fixer known mainly for his unofficial mediation between Israel and Arab countries. According to the report, Nader met frequently with Trump's White House officials to discuss the plot.
It's hard to imagine that the United States did not know